Under the vast expanse of a quiet alien sky, two ethereal beings, Princess Sarah and Princess Elara, found themselves marooned on a distant, uncharted world. Their gleaming silver spaceship lay broken among jagged cliffs, its once glorious engines silent. Dressed in flowing metallic robes, the alien sisters stood side by side, their expressions veiled in equal parts fear and frustration. The silence was heavy, broken only by the hum of broken circuits and the occasional sparks flying from the shattered ship. Zara brushed her silver-blue hair back from her face, her glowing amber eyes scanning the wrecked ship. "If only we hadn't trusted the star charts from Homeworld," she muttered in frustration. Elara, the younger of the two, knelt beside the tangled wires and mangled circuits. Her pale violet fingers moved swiftly, yet the damage was beyond what either of them could repair. "Arkhams are gone," Elara whispered, her voice tinged with anxiety. "No signals, no way home." The desert wind howled, kicking up spirals of sand. Night was falling fast, and the twin suns that scorched the planet would soon be replaced by a biting cold. They had crossed galaxies, evaded hostile fleets, and now found themselves hopelessly stranded on this primitive world, Earth. Then, through the haze of dusk, a figure emerged. At first, it seemed like a mirage, lone silhouette cutting through the barren landscape, but as it moved closer, the figure took shape. Tall, broad-shouldered human man. He wore a rugged leather jacket that looked worn by 100 adventures, and a tool belt hung loosely around his waist. Dust covered his boots, but there was a calm, deliberate ease in his stride as he approached the wreck. His name was Jack Monroe, an ex-military engineer turned drifter. Jack's piercing green eyes flicked from the damaged spacecraft to the alien princesses, his expression unreadable. There was no fear, only curiosity and something more. A hint of fascination. "Well," he said with a lopsided grin, "looks like y'all could use a hand." Zara and Elara exchanged cautious glances. In all their journeys across the stars, they had never encountered a human face to face. Earth was supposed to be an uncharted backwater, place forgotten by the great empires of the galaxy. Yet here stood this man, calm, confident, and utterly unbothered by their otherworldly presence. Zara narrowed her glowing amber eyes. "You're not afraid?" she asked, her voice sharp and measured. Jack chuckled softly, the kind of laugh that seemed to say he'd seen stranger things before. "Afraid? Nah." He bent down to inspect the wrecked ship, running a hand over the bent metal like a mechanic inspecting an old truck. "When you've been to enough corners of this world, you learn that things aren't always what they seem." Lara, still crouching beside the broken circuits, tilted her head curiously. "Can you fix it?" Her tone was hesitant, as if she didn't want to hope, but couldn't help herself. Jack adjusted the brim of his worn-out hat and pulled a multi-tool from his belt. "Might not look like much," he said, giving the tool a small flick, "but I've patched up things worse than this in my time." Without waiting for permission, Jack knelt beside the ship and began working. His hands moved with the ease of someone who had spent a lifetime tinkering with machines. He didn't seem fazed by the alien technology. If anything, he seemed excited by the challenge. "You trust this human?" Zara whispered to Elara in their native language, her voice low and wary. "Do we have a choice?" Elara whispered back. "He seems capable, and we need all the help we can get." Jack glanced up, catching the end of their exchange, though he didn't seem to understand the words. "Whatever you're saying, I hope it's good," he said with a grin, "because this wiring is a mess." Zara sighed but took a step back, allowing Jack to continue. The human worked with surprising speed, carefully untangling wires and rerouting circuits as if he could read the ship's design intuitively. His hands were rough, calloused from years of hard labor, but they moved delicately, almost reverently, as he reconnected panels and adjusted fuses. As the sun dipped below the horizon, plunging the desert into shadow, Jack managed to coax a flicker of power back into the ship. A faint hum echoed through the hull, and one of the external lights sputtered to life. It wasn't much, but it was a start. "There we go," Jack said with a satisfied grin. "Not bad for a backwater human, huh?" Zara folded her arms, still not fully trusting this stranger. "Why are you helping us?" she asked bluntly. "What's in it for you?" Jack leaned back on his heels, brushing dust from his hands. For a moment, he seemed to consider the question seriously. Then he gave a slow shrug. "Maybe I just like fixing things. Or maybe." He glanced between the two princesses with a mischievous twinkle in his eye. "I figured I couldn't let two space royalty freeze to death out here." Dilara let out a soft laugh, a sound Zara hadn't heard from her sister in days. Zara shot her a look, but Dilara only shrugged, her violet eyes sparkling with the tiniest flicker of hope. "We don't have much," Zara admitted reluctantly, "but if you help us get the ship running, we'll owe you a favor." Jack gave a low whistle. "A favor from a couple of alien princesses." He grinned. "Now that's a deal I can't pass up." The princesses exchanged glances again, this time less wary and more curious. The man was strange, no doubt about that, but there was something undeniably compelling about his confidence, something almost comforting. As the night deepened, Jack continued to work under the ship's flickering lights, his shadow stretching across the sand like a sentinel standing guard over this unlikely trio. Zara and Dilara watched in silence, the weight of their hopeless situation lifting slightly with every spark of progress. Little did they know, this human would prove to be far more than just a repairman. In the days to come, his strength, ingenuity, and kindness would not only get their ship flying again, but also change the course of their lives, and perhaps even the fate of their distant homeworld. The night stretched on, and with it came new challenges. The temperature plummeted sharply, and a biting wind cut through the desert like a blade. Dilara shivered, pulling her metallic robe tighter around her slender frame. Jack, noticing the princesses struggling with the cold, stood up from the ship and walked to his old backpack, slung carelessly against a nearby rock. "Desert gets cold quick," he remarked, tossing a couple of wool blankets toward the sisters. Zara caught hers, her sharp gaze studying the human. The simple kindness caught her off guard. There was no demand or expectation, just a quiet gesture to help them survive the night. As Dilara wrapped herself in the blanket, she smiled slightly. "Thank you, Jack." Jack gave her a quick nod. "Figured you aliens could survive hyperspace, but Earth's deserts, they're a whole different beast." He returned to the damaged ship, his mind already working through solutions. The technology was advanced, far beyond anything he had encountered, but he saw patterns, universal principles that bridged the gap between their worlds. Machinery, he had learned, was more about understanding systems than knowing specifics. "Broken ship is just a big puzzle," he thought to himself. Meanwhile, Zara kept her distance. She didn't trust easily, and this man, kind though he seemed, was still a stranger. As Jack worked, she paced slowly around the camp, her sharp amber eyes scanning the horizon. The dunes stretched endlessly in every direction, and something about the silence unsettled her. "This world feels strange," Zara whispered to Dilara. "Like it's hiding something." Dilara, resting beside the half-repaired ship, glanced toward her sister with a tired smile. "Maybe, but we've got him now." She nodded toward Jack. "I think he'll surprise us." Just as the words left her lips, the hum of the ship's engine grew louder. Jack stood up, brushing sand from his hands, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "All right, I think we're halfway there. The core's not totally fried, but the rest, it'll take time." Zara stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "How much time?" Jack shrugged. "Couple of days, if we're lucky." He looked between them, sensing their growing unease. "Relax. I've got food, water, and tools. We'll be fine." But just as the trio began to settle, Zara froze. Her sharp eyes locked onto something on the distant horizon. A flicker of movement. "Something's coming," she whispered, tension flooding her voice. Jack turned swiftly, scanning the horizon. Through the moonlight, 3 dark shapes emerged over the ridge, low, fast-moving, and deliberate. They were scavenger drones, old military relics repurposed to hunt down anything of value. "Those aren't friendly," Jack muttered, instantly shifting into a defensive stance. He yanked a crowbar from his belt and stood between the princesses and the advancing threat. Zara's heart pounded. "We need weapons." "I've got this." Jack's grin returned, but this time it carried a dangerous edge. The drones sped closer, their glowing sensors locking onto the ship. One of them unleashed a volley of sparks toward the group, forcing them to dive behind the wreckage. Jack didn't flinch. In a blur of movement, he sprinted toward the closest drone. He hurled the crowbar with precision, striking its core and sending it spiraling into the sand. With a swift kick, Jack ripped out its power supply before it could recover. Another drone swooped down, but Zara and Elora reacted in tandem. Using quick bursts of alien energy from their fingertips, they disabled the drone's sensor array, throwing it into confusion. "Not bad for some royalty," Jack quipped as he smashed the final drone into pieces with a single powerful blow. Breathing heavily, Jack wiped sweat from his brow. "Well, that was fun." Zara crossed her arms, a reluctant smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth. "You're reckless." "And you're welcome," Jack shot back with a wink. Dilara laughed softly. "I think we'll keep him." With the threat neutralized, the trio returned to the ship, their bond solidifying with each shared experience. But deep down, Zara knew that Earth's dangers were only beginning to reveal themselves, and this human, with his strange blend of strength and humor, was quickly becoming more valuable than she ever expected. As dawn broke over the endless dunes, the warm sunlight spilled across the wrecked spaceship. Jack was already up, tools in hand, buried deep inside one of the engine compartments. His fingers worked skillfully, reconnecting circuits and making subtle adjustments, a look of deep concentration on his face. Zara sat nearby, watching him in silence. There was a peculiar comfort in seeing him work, his movements deliberate yet unhurried. It was as though Jack carried the weight of the universe lightly on his shoulders, an attitude Zara found both infuriating and fascinating. Dilara stirred awake, stretching beneath her blanket. "Any luck?" she asked sleepily. Jack wiped sweat from his brow, giving the engine panel a light tap. "Almost there. This beauty will purr like a kitten soon enough." He glanced over at the sisters, his grin never faltering. "You 2 aliens aren't too bad in a scrap, by the way." Dilara smiled at the compliment, but Zara remained cautious. "How do you know so much about machines?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. Jack gave a small shrug. "Spent most of my life taking things apart and putting them back together. In the military, then later, well, out here." He motioned vaguely toward the open desert, as if the landscape itself held all the answers. "You were a soldier?" Dilara asked, her eyes widening with curiosity. Jack's expression darkened for a brief moment, the easy grin slipping. Not anymore." There was a weight in those words, a hint of something unspoken, something painful. But before the princesses could press further, Jack redirected the conversation. "So," he said, leaning against the engine compartment, "what brings 2 alien princesses to this dusty corner of the universe?" The sisters exchanged glances. Zara's gaze hardened, as if debating how much to reveal. But Elara, always the softer of the two, decided to speak. "Our homeworld is complicated," she began. "There's a political conflict, a faction trying to overthrow the monarchy." Zara added with a touch of bitterness, "We were sent on a diplomatic mission to secure allies, but something went wrong. A fleet ambushed us in hyperspace. And your ship took a hit." Jack finished the thought, nodding in understanding. "Yes," Zara confirmed, We barely escaped, and now, thanks to the damage, we're stuck here. The longer we stay grounded, the more likely our enemies are to find us." Jack whistled low, rubbing the back of his neck. "Sounds like you two are in a real mess." "That's an understatement," Zara muttered. Jack knelt beside the engine again, his tone lighter. "Well, lucky for you, I've got a soft spot for impossible odds." Zara rolled her eyes. "That's supposed to make us feel better." Jack laughed. "Hey, if there's one thing humans are good at, it's surviving when we really shouldn't." Laura smiled softly, but her sister remained unconvinced. Zara wasn't used to relying on others, especially not strangers from unknown worlds. But something about Jack made her want to believe in him, even if only a little. Suddenly, a loud hum vibrated through the air, and the ship's console flickered to life. Jack let out a triumphant shout, clapping his hands together. "There she goes. Told you I'd get her running." Laura jumped to her feet, her eyes glowing with excitement. "You did it." Even Zara couldn't suppress a small smile. "I have to admit, I didn't think you'd manage." Jack winked. "Told you, humans are full of surprises." As the power stabilized, Zara moved to the control panel and began checking the systems. She frowned, tapping several buttons. "We still have a problem. The hyperspace drive is offline. We're grounded until it's fixed." Jack scratched his chin thoughtfully. "That's not great." Laura sighed. "No, it's really not." Jack straightened up, hands on his hips. "All right, so we stay put for a bit longer, patch things up, and when we're ready, we'll get you two flying again." Zara raised an eyebrow. "We?" "Yeah, we." Jack grinned, adjusting his hat. "You're not getting rid of me that easily." The words hung in the air, warm and reassuring. For the first time since they crashed on Earth, the alien princesses felt a flicker of hope, fragile but real. This strange human, with his quiet strength and easy humor, had somehow made himself indispensable. But as they stood together, a new thought nagged at Zara. "Jack," she asked cautiously, "if you're willing to help two alien fugitives, what exactly are you running from?" Jack's smile faltered for just a moment, a crack in the armor he wore so well. But then the grin returned, brighter than before. "That," he said, "is a story for another time." The next day dawned bright and merciless, with the sun bearing down heavily upon the trio. Jack had made significant progress, but the most crucial piece, the hyperspace drive, remained fried beyond use. The mood inside the camp grew tense as they realized time was running out. Zara paced near the ship's nose, her arms folded tight across her chest. Laura leaned against a metal crate, anxiously biting her lip, her glowing eyes following Jack as he ran diagnostics on the remaining systems. Jack, on the other hand, seemed unusually calm, his sharp gaze fixated on the sparking control module before him. After a long silence, Zara couldn't contain herself any longer. "This is hopeless," she muttered. "Without that drive, we're stranded here, easy prey for anyone tracking us." Jack didn't look up, his hand still busy rewiring a tangled mass of circuits. "I wouldn't say hopeless, just complicated." Zara shot him an exasperated glare. "We don't have time for complicated. Every second we stay on this planet puts us at greater risk." Laura, sensing the rising tension, spoke up in a softer tone. "Do you have a plan, Jack? There has to be something we can do." Jack finally stood, brushing dust from his hands. "There is," he said, his voice steady, "but you're not going to like it." Zara narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean?" Jack adjusted his hat, his expression unreadable. "There's an old scrapyard not far from here. It's run by some less than friendly folks, but they have what we need, a power core that might jumpstart your hyperspace drive." "And what's the catch?" Zara asked, suspicion dripping from her words. Jack gave a lopsided grin. "The catch is that they don't give anything away for free. These guys aren't the bargaining type. If we want that core, we'll need to take it, by force." Laura's eyes widened. You mean, steal it? Borrow it, Jack corrected with a mischievous glint. Let's call it an urgent loan. Zara scowled. That's your plan? Rob a gang of criminals and hope we make it out alive. Jack shrugged casually. Unless you've got a better idea, Princess, this is our best shot. Delara glanced between Jack and Zara, her face a mixture of worry and curiosity. It sounds dangerous. Jack chuckled. Dangerous? Sure, but I've done worse. He gave them a reassuring smile. You two just need to trust me. Zara's jaw clenched. The idea of relying on a human, let alone following him into danger, felt like madness. But at the same time, what choice did they have? Without the core, they were doomed to remain stranded. And despite her reservations, Jack had proven himself capable so far. Delara, always the optimist, touched Zara's arm. We don't have another option. I think we should trust him. Zara exhaled sharply, frustration clear on her face. But after a moment, she gave a reluctant nod. Fine, but if this goes wrong? It won't, Jack said confidently, cutting her off. Just stick close to me, and we'll be fine. He gave the ship one final pat, as if promising it wouldn't be long before it soared through the stars again. We leave at dusk. The scrapyard will be quieter by then. Zara shook her head, still unsure if this plan was brilliance or insanity. I hope you know what you're doing, Jack. Jack flashed a grin, tipping the brim of his hat. Don't worry, Princess. Always know what I'm doing. As dusk fell over the desert, the trio prepared for their mission. The air was thick with tension, the gravity of their situation settling over them like a heavy cloud. Jack checked his gear, ensuring everything was in place. Zara and Delara stood nearby, their alien senses on high alert. Stick to the plan, Jack said, his voice low but steady. In and out, quick and quiet. Delara nodded nervously. Zara, however, remained silent, her sharp eyes fixed on the horizon. She didn't fully trust Jack, but for now, she would follow his lead. The scrapyard lay just beyond the next ridge, a sprawling maze of rusted metal and forgotten machines. Faint lights flickered among the piles of debris, and the distant hum of drones patrolling the perimeter echoed in the night. Jack crouched low, gesturing for the sisters to follow. Stay close, he whispered, and whatever happens, don't panic. Zara scoffed quietly. Do I look like someone who panics? Jack gave her a quick wink. Let's hope not. With that, the three of them slipped into the shadows, disappearing into the labyrinth of the scrapyard. The stakes were higher than ever, but there was no turning back now. Their lives, and their freedom, depended on the success of this dangerous plan. The scrapyard loomed ahead like a sleeping beast, its mountains of rusted metal casting eerie shadows under the faint glow of flickering perimeter lights. Jack, Zara, and Delara crouched behind an old pile of discarded machinery, surveying the maze of debris before them. Faint whirs echoed through the night as drones patrolled the area, their sensors sweeping lazily across the scrapyard. This place reeks of trouble, Zara muttered, her sharp eyes tracking a drone's flight path. Jack smirked, adjusting the brim of his hat. Relax. I've got it covered. Zara gave him a skeptical glance. You're far too confident for someone about to rob a gang of criminals. Jack shot her a wink. Confidence, Princess, is half the battle. Delara giggled softly, but Zara rolled her eyes, whispering under her breath. We'll see how far confidence gets us. Jack knelt low, motioning for them to follow him. The power core should be in the central depot. Stick close, stay quiet, and whatever you do, don't touch anything. The trio moved like shadows, slipping between piles of scrap and defunct vehicles. Jack led the way, his movements fluid and precise. Zara and Delara followed close behind, their senses alert to the slightest sound or movement. As they navigated deeper into the scrapyard, Jack held up a hand, signaling for them to stop. Head. A security drone hovered slowly, its red sensor sweeping across the ground. Jack reached into his tool belt and pulled out a small device, flipping a switch. The drone shuddered mid-flight, its sensor dimming as it lost power, and dropped to the ground with a soft thud. Zara raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. "Where did you get that?" Jack grinned. "Picked it up along the way. Told you, I'm good with machines." They pressed on, weaving through narrow paths until they reached the heart of the scrapyard, the central depot. It was an open space, cluttered with spare parts and crates of salvaged equipment. At the far end of the area sat the power core, a glowing cylindrical device humming softly in the night. "There it is," Ilara whispered excitedly. Finally, Zara muttered, her eyes narrowing. "Let's get it and get out of here." But just as they stepped into the depot, a low, mechanical growl rumbled through the air. Jack froze, his jaw tightening. "We've got company." Out of the shadows, a massive guard drone emerged. A relic of old wars, its heavy frame bristling with rusted weaponry. The drone's red sensor locked onto them, and with a loud whir, it powered up, preparing to attack. "Go for the core," Jack barked, drawing his crowbar. "I'll handle this." Zara hesitated for only a second before nodding. "Ilara, come on." The two princesses sprinted toward the power core as Jack charged the drone head-on. The machine fired a burst of energy, but Jack was quick, dodging to the side and slamming his crowbar into the drone's leg joint. Sparks flew, but the drone remained standing, its weapons rotating toward Jack. "Any time now," Jack shouted over the hum of the drone's cannon. Zara reached the power core, her hands glowing as she activated the energy fields around it. Ilara, despite the pressure, kept calm, using her alien abilities to disconnect the locking mechanisms with precision. "I got it," Ilara called out. "Good," Jack yelled, dodging another blast from the drone. He rolled to his feet, delivering a powerful strike to the drone's exposed wiring. The machine sputtered and lurched, its systems glitching. Zara grabbed the core, her muscles straining as she carried the heavy device toward Jack. "We need to go. Now." Jack glanced at the stuttering drone and gave it one final kick, sending it crashing into a pile of junk. "I'm right behind you." With the core in hand, the three of them bolted toward the scrapyard's exit, the faint hum of other drones stirring behind them. Jack led the way, his movements fast and deliberate, while Zara and Ilara followed close behind, their breaths quick and hearts pounding. The scrapyard alarm blared suddenly, a piercing sound that echoed through the night. More drones began to stir, their sensors lighting up as they locked onto the escaping trio. "We're not going to make it," Ilara gasped, glancing back at the approaching drones. Jack skidded to a stop near an old truck, quickly hotwiring the rusted engine. It roared to life with a shuddering cough. "Get in!" Zara hauled the core into the truck bed while Ilara scrambled into the passenger seat. Jack floored the gas, and the truck jolted forward, tearing through the scrapyard gates with a screech of tires. The pursuing drones fired wildly, but the trio sped off into the night, the scrapyard shrinking behind them. Ilara let out a breathless laugh, her heart still racing. "We did it." Zara, catching her breath, gave Jack a sideways glance. "You're insane." Jack grinned, steering the truck toward the distant horizon. "Maybe, but we got what we came for." The night desert roared with the engine of the old truck, tearing across dunes as the trio raced toward the wrecked ship. Dust billowed in their wake, and the sky above seemed to stretch endlessly, the stars gleaming like silent witnesses to their escape. Jack gripped the steering wheel tightly, glancing into the side mirror where the faint hum of pursuing drones faded into the distance. They were in the clear for now. "You're crazy," Zara muttered, though a reluctant smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. "Yeah, but you can't say it wasn't fun," Jack replied, flashing that familiar grin. Ilara laughed, the adrenaline still buzzing through her veins. "That was terrifying. But I think I'm starting to understand why humans are so unpredictable." As the truck sped closer to their ship, the weight of their victory settled over them. The power core sat in the truck's bed, humming softly, a beacon of hope in their otherwise dire situation. The final repairs. By the time they reached the crash site, the horizon was beginning to glow with the first light of dawn. Jack parked the truck beside the ship, and the three of them got to work. Zara and Ilara carefully unloaded the power core, while Jack grabbed his tools and set about connecting it to the damaged hyperspace drive. The next few hours passed in tense silence, broken only by the occasional hum of machinery. Jack's hands moved deftly, patching wires and adjusting circuits with the precision of a surgeon. Zara and Ilara watched, their alien technology slowly coming back to life under this human's skilled touch. Finally, with one last twist of his wrench, Jack stepped back from the control panel. "That should do it," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Try firing her up." Zara moved to the ship's console and tapped a few glowing keys. The ship rumbled, and then, like a heartbeat returning to life, the engines roared to life. Lights flickered across the control panels, and the external thrusters hummed steadily, ready for takeoff. Ilara clapped her hands in delight. "It works." Jack grinned, satisfied. "Told you." But Zara wasn't celebrating just yet. She turned to Jack, her expression serious. "The ship is ready, but what about you? Why help us? Why risk everything?" Jack's smile softened. "I've spent a lot of time running, from my past, from people, from places. But meeting you two," he paused, looking from Zara to Ilara. "Maybe I just wanted to help someone, for once, without running away." Zara held his gaze, her amber eyes searching his face for any hint of deception, but all she saw was honesty, and perhaps something more. "Thank you," she said quietly, the words carrying more weight than she expected. Ilara, smiling gently, added, "We won't forget what you've done for us." Difficult goodbye. With the ship ready and the path clear, it was time for the sisters to leave. The moment felt heavier than any of them had anticipated. Jack stood by as Zara and Ilara made the final checks on the ship. The hum of the engines filled the air, a reminder that their time on Earth was coming to an end. Ilara gave Jack a warm hug, catching him off guard. "You'll always be welcome among the stars, Jack," she whispered. Jack chuckled, patting her back awkwardly. "I'll keep that in mind, Princess." Zara approached Jack more slowly, her usual guarded demeanor softened. "You know," she said, her voice quiet, "you're not like any human I've ever met." Jack gave a small smile. "And you're not like any aliens I've met." For a moment, it seemed like Zara wanted to say more, but instead, she offered him a nod of respect, an acknowledgement of everything they had been through together. Jack returned the gesture, his gaze steady. "Take care of yourself out there," Zara said softly. "You too," Jack replied. "And if you ever need help again, you know where to find me." With that, the two sisters boarded their ship. Jack watched as the doors sealed shut and the engines roared to life. The sleek vessel hovered above the ground, its thrusters kicking up clouds of dust, before shooting into the sky with a blinding burst of light. Jack stood alone in the desert, watching the ship disappear into the stars. His strange feeling settled over him, not sadness, but something close to it. A quiet sense of fulfillment, perhaps, or the realization that for the first time in a long while, he had done something that mattered. As the sun climbed higher into the sky, Jack turned back toward the empty desert. The adventure was over, but something told him that life wasn't quite done with him yet. Maybe he would keep moving, drifting from place to place, or maybe, just maybe, he'd find a reason to stop running. With a final glance toward the sky where the alien ship had vanished, Jack adjusted his hat, slung his pack over his shoulder, and set off across the dunes. After all, the universe was a big place, and you never knew what might come next. And with that, the story reaches its end. Journey of trust, survival, and unexpected friendships across the stars.